Borderlands is a hugely successful franchise consisting of 4 great games, all coming with multiple DLC packs. Recently I've been replaying Borderlands 1 and 2 and really enjoyed playing them in 2021. Ever wondered which game is better? Stick around to find out. How am I going to decide which reigns supreme over the other? Borderlands 1 or Borderlands 2? I will be taking into account the story and characters and which had the more interesting of the two. I'll be talking about which has the best loot, boss fights, map design, amongst other details which will give us a decisive answer as to which is the best Borderlands out of the first 2 releases. I'm going to try and keep spoilers to a complete minimum for those of you that haven't played, so let's get straight into it. Borderlands 1 was released in 2009 and the story focuses on a group of vault hunters who travel to a planet called Pandora in search of a vault that is rumoured to contain alien technology and mass fortune. At the beginning you are dropped off at your first location called Firestone, and this is where your story starts and you meet your first few characters, the most important being the Guardian Angel. Angel explains to the vault hunters that they are needed to open a vault, and your roughly 15-hour story begins there. That may not seem like a lot, but that's not including DLC or true Vault Hunter mode. Eventually you will meet Patricia Tannis, who is an archaeologist that was sent to Pandora many years before you arrived to research the vault, to find out where it was, what was inside and how to open it. Tannis will help you in your quest to open the vault, and although she had some entertaining dialogue, I didn't find her all that memorable. The main threat and enemy to the Vault Hunters also wasn't very memorable or interesting. I'd completely forgot they existed until I started making this video. I found Claptrap just as funny as ever, but that's nothing special as he is also entertaining and laugh out loud funny in a second. Borderlands 2 was released in 2012, and whenever I think of Borderlands 2, I think of the fantastic antagonist Handsome Jack. The story of Borderlands 2 follows on some 5 years later after the events of the first, and Handsome Jack has declared himself the ruler of Pandora and took all of the credit for the events that unfolded during Borderlands 1. Your task is to bring peace back to Pandora, and it is revealed there is a second vault which you need to find. To avoid spoilers I won't say why. Jack is the most memorable character in Borderlands 2 and does a fantastic job of playing the bad guy. Jack is one of the most memorable antagonists of not only the Borderlands series, but one of the best antagonists I've come across during games. Borderlands 2 has also much more dialogue, so the story is much easier to follow, whereas the first, you'd have to read every mission script to know what was going on, which kind of felt like a chore. Borderlands is known for its brilliant shoot and loot theme. The games are full with all kinds of guns and shields you can use. Borderlands 1 was a great introduction to this, and many games have tried to duplicate its style, and at the time of its release, I was really impressed with the variety of loot. But Borderlands 2 is a completely different beast. It has even more loot than its predecessor, and I feel legendary items are dropped even more often. There is also more variety in weapon abilities which make items more unique. I also feel you get rewarded with much more loot and cash after defeating a boss in Borderlands 2 than you did in Borderlands 1. Both games deliver a great amount of loot, but I would have to say Borderlands 2 has an edge. However, make sure you open every locker and every chest in both games, because both games have a great amount of loot and you could be rewarded with anything from a common grenade mod to a legendary weapon. A huge part of the Borderlands experience is not only looting, it's the mega exciting boss fights. Borderlands 1 bosses I felt were really easy to defeat, and I didn't really feel like it was a challenge like it was supposed to feel. The final boss fight has never been fun. When the original game came out, they had a bullet sponge as a final boss, which was soon updated to a weaker version of the same monster, which led to a disappointing end fight because it was so easy. Borderlands 2 improves this aspect of the game, and not only were boss fights much more difficult, which made it more enjoyable, I also felt as though there were more variety of bosses. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, defeating bosses also rewarded you with much more loot at the end of it. It also took different tactics and weapons to defeat different bosses because it was more difficult, which made them even more entertaining. I felt both games had great locations, but again, I just feel Borderlands 2 outdone Borderlands 1. At the beginning of the first, you start at a small abandoned town, and it's a nice location, don't get me wrong, but I felt most of the locations had similar dark grey colours, so wandering around the new locations felt too familiar. It was still enjoyable to explore because the locations we were given were filled with dangerous enemies. However, Borderlands 2 starts you off in a frosty and cold environment, and not long after you discover the populated small town of Sanctuary. Throughout your playthrough you'll discover new and vibrant locations in Borderlands 2 which all feel different, which Borderlands 1 didn't have. I feel the second done a great job with Sanctuary, and I felt like I actually had a meaningful place to return to buy things on the black market, sell my unwanted items, or maybe even just visit Mad Moxie at her bar. But I felt Borderlands 1 never had anywhere as special as Sanctuary. Yeah, you had the small town of New Haven, but there was nobody there that was worth me visiting again. Both Borderlands 1 and 2 are fantastic games. As a huge shoot and loot fan, I found them both extremely enjoyable even in 2021. But the best out of the two is definitely the second. Borderlands 2 improves on every single aspect of the game from the first, which makes a more entertaining and enjoyable experience when exploring Pandora. Borderlands 2 has more loot, a wider range of enemies to slaughter, and a fantastic story with an amazing antagonist, which tips the scales in their favour as the best game out of the two. I have multiple Borderlands videos over on my channel, so if you enjoyed this, make sure you go and check them out, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss any future content.